Loki, the trickster god of legends. He has numerous illegitimate children. All of them are extremely wicked, and among them are hidden in certain dark corners of Earth, specifically hunting down adventurers who come exploring. This trail, located at the border of Sweden and Norway, is famous for hiking. It's far from the city, although there's no signal, but it can temporarily make you forget all your worries and stress. On this day, 4 companions arranged to meet here, but it started raining shortly after. However, it didn't discourage them from hiking. Unfortunately, Tom accidentally sprained his leg. According to the plan, they were supposed to spend 6 hours hiking from the edge of the forest to their temporary campsite. After resting there, they would spend another 8 hours returning to the hotel. Tom expressed that he couldn't hike for 14 hours. So, Hutch took out the map and decided to hike through the forest directly, which would take approximately 7 hours to reach the hotel. All 4 of them were experienced hikers, but they hadn't experienced directly crossing a forest before. Given the current situation, they had no choice. They would never have expected that during this trip in the forest, they would encounter a descendant of a deity. They had only just entered the forest when their compass malfunctioned. Hutch didn't inform the others about it. He believed that with their abilities, they could manage without a compass. After all, they just needed to keep moving forward. While they were contemplating their dinner options, Luke was startled by something ahead of them. A reindeer is hanging from a tree. Although visually shocking, the group speculates it could be the work of a hunter, used as bait for a trap. Luke noticed that the dead deer was still dripping blood, indicating that the deer hadn't been dead for long. The perpetrator might not have gone far, so the group quickly left the scene. Hutch overestimated their abilities. Without the help of the compass, they hadn't found a way out of the forest by evening. Fortunately, they were about to set up camp when they spotted a cabin not far away. Although the house was in bad condition, it provided shelter from wind and rain. Upon entering, they discovered there was a hunting rifle and some old furniture, and a strange scarecrow with human hands as its feet. Such a peculiar design and appearance sparked a discussion among them. They sat around the campfire. They speculated that it could be a prop used by indigenous people for worshipping deities. After chatting for a while, they went to sleep. Before long, the sky suddenly brightened. Luke was startled awake by the intense light, and walked out of the door. Unexpectedly found that he was in a supermarket. He instinctively grabbed a bottle of alcohol from the shelf. Then he suddenly woke up from the dream. The sun was already shining brightly. Luke noticed 5 bleeding wounds on his chest, but he felt no pain at all. Before he could react, Hutch's loud scream came from inside the cabin. It seemed like he had a nightmare. When Luke woke him up, he noticed Hutch had wet his pants out of fear. What a terrifying nightmare it must have been, to frighten an adult like that? Then Luke noticed Tom was also acting strangely, shouting his wife's name loudly. What's even stranger, Luke noticed Phil was holding the scarecrow and not moving. Luke woke him up. Phil was also puzzled and confused. They didn't know why they would do such a thing. After a series of eerie experiences, the group decided to leave immediately. No more random thoughts, saying no more random thoughts, but at this moment, the trembling hands and eyes of the 4 was enough to indicate their inner unease. The group continued along a forest path. They saw many tree stumps used for lighting along the way. This indicates that someone has been here. Tom wanted to sit down and rest for a while. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Luke decided to go to a high place and look around to see if their direction was correct. But when he reached the top of the small slope, he found nothing but forest around him. This made him feel incredibly hopeless. Suddenly, he seemed to smell a strange odor. When he looked up, but he discovered something. Luke felt something was wrong. He hurried back to the resting spot. He urged everyone to leave quickly. Tom didn't realize the seriousness of the problem. Luke revealed his wounds on his chest. Only then did everyone believe. But now they didn't even have a compass. How could they find a way out? The sky quickly turned dark. They still couldn't find a way out. So they prepared to camp again on the spot. They ate some of the food they brought and spent the night. Suddenly, Luke heard strange noises outside. Then Phil suddenly shouted. When Luke came out, he saw Phil kneeling on the ground, pointing at the tent that had been destroyed. Phil said, "A dark figure took Hutch away. In this forest, they were like fish on a chopping board." Just at that moment, Hutch's screams came from a distance. The group followed the sound and investigated, but even until dawn, they couldn't find Hutch, who had been taken away. A more serious problem arose. They couldn't find their way back. which meant all their equipment and supplies were gone. The group rested by the trees for a while, preparing to continue their journey. However, before they had gone far, they saw Hutch hanging from a tree. His condition was the same as that of the dead deer, with his belly split open and hanging from the treetop. Luke almost couldn't hold back the urge to vomit. The group couldn't possibly carry Hutch with them, so they took him down from the tree and covered him with branches. Then they continued on their way. After a while, they found a small stream and drank to their heart's content. Luke regained his composure and saw human tracks not far away. Seeing this situation, the three of them believed it was the work of nearby hunters. They decided not to follow the footprints' direction and climbed up a hill, continuing southwest. Yet, they didn't notice the shadow of a monster appearing not far behind them. Luke was the first to reach the top of the hill and saw the edge of the forest in the distance. He informed Tom and Phil, who were resting, and to make things even better, the compass started working again at that moment. Once again, as they looked up, fires lit up in the opposite forest, indicating the presence of people. But just as Luke was about to inform the others, he witnessed a horrifying scene. A monster resembling a tame deer grabbed Phil. The four-person team now only has Luke and Tom left. Tom was paralyzed with fear, expressing that the monster was approaching, ready to kill them all. Luke hurriedly reassured Tom, promising not to leave him behind. Luke helped Tom up, and they prepared to leave quickly. The two arrived at a winding path, illuminated by torches on both sides. At this moment, they also noticed that Phil was hanging from a tree as well. At the end of the path, another wooden house appeared. Exhausted, the two collapsed inside the house. They saw an old woman in a black robe in the house, but before they could speak, they were struck unconscious by someone. When they woke up, it was already the next morning. The old lady came to bring water for Luke, and soon two people came in and took Tom away. Soon, screams from Tom could be heard, and a blonde woman entered the room where Luke was imprisoned. Her companions were preparing for a sacrificial ritual. After a while, Tom, covered in injuries, was brought back. He knew their intentions, and told Luke that his time was running out. He instructed Luke to escape from this place, and find an opportunity to burn down this eerie place. Then, Tom was taken away by the people, and tied to a wooden stake. Looking around, Tom noticed that there were bodies hanging from trees everywhere. He was tied up until nightfall. Luke was not idle either. He was trying to find a way to escape, but the ropes were tied too tightly, causing his wrists to be scraped. Yet he couldn't free himself. Luke was a tough person, and he made a tough decision. He decided to break his own thumb in order to free his hands. He looked out through a hole in the wall, and it seemed like there were creatures coming towards him from the forest. When they revealed their true forms, it turned out to be Gail, Tom's wife. Tom called out loudly, and she came to his side, gently caressing his cheek. Tom suddenly snapped out of the illusion, realizing that it wasn't Gail in front of him, but a horrifying monster. The monster accepted the offerings from the followers, and hung Tom on a tree as well. At that moment, the blonde woman found Luke again. Luke spoke up and asked, "Who exactly is that monster?" The blonde woman explained, "That wasn't just any monster. It's the descendant of Loki. It granted eternal life to these followers, and they repay it with sacrifices." The blonde woman then mentioned, "Tonight, they will prepare an eternal life ritual for you. Luke, the reason they accepted you as a follower is because of the pain in your heart." After the blonde woman left, Luke felt the urgency to escape. He discarded the ropes and searched the room for useful items. Next to it was a storage room filled with many hunting guns. Luke wanted to make a direct escape, but he saw multiple followers guarding the entrance. He had no choice but to go upstairs. However, from one of the rooms, he heard several people reciting scriptures together. Luke grabbed a torch and prepared to investigate, but just as he opened the door, the chanting abruptly stopped. Inside, there were not any followers, but dozens of dried-up corpses. Luke didn't dare to make any sudden movements, as these corpses seemed to come to life suddenly. So, this is exactly the immortality the blonde woman was talking about. Although having obtained immortality, the body still gradually ages, ultimately turning into this appearance. Luke lit these immortal beings on fire with a torch, allowing them to find release. The monster sensed the situation of its followers, and immediately rushed towards this direction. The followers didn't know what had happened. They knelt on the ground, worshipping. Luke had no choice but to go to the warehouse. He picked up a hunting gun to avoid being defenseless. Luke was about to escape, but the monster had already arrived. Luke forcefully broke through the wooden wall that was on fire, and then ran frantically into the forest. Luke wanted to look back. He saw the monster strangling the blonde woman to death, and lifting her high. Luke raised the weapon in his hand, and shot at the monster. Realizing it had no effect, he could only run away. With a loud roar from the monster, Luke once again entered the dream he had before. Rows of supermarket shelves appeared in the forest. In fact, this is the deep pain in Luke's heart. Before coming here on foot, Luke and his friend Robert went to a convenience store to buy alcohol, but they happened to encounter a few thugs robbing the store. Luke was scared and hid on the side. Robert, on the other hand, stood up, but he was no match for the two criminals. One of the criminals struck Robert on the head, causing him to die on the spot. Meanwhile, Luke was just hiding behind. He witnessed the process of his friend being killed, and didn't utter a sound. Although it can be explained as being scared silly, it cannot make Luke forgive himself. He replayed it countless times in his mind. If he had also acted like Robert at that time, would the outcome have been completely different? But there is no regret medicine in the world. Luke continued to run forward in the illusion. Soon, the monster knocked Luke away. Luke rolled on the ground several times. The axe in his hand also fell to the ground. The edge of the forest was within reach. Luke stood up and moved forward. The monster pushed Luke down to the ground, wanting to forcefully perform the immortality ritual on him, turning Luke into its follower. Luke saw the axe right in front of him, so he raised the axe and struck the monster. The monster cried out in pain. Luke quickly rushed out of the forest. The monster did not chase after him closely. Perhaps it was confined there, only able to roar angrily at Luke. Seeing that the monster couldn't leave the forest, Luke was no longer afraid. He yelled back in response, and thus, the film ends. The film The Ritual, directed by David Bruckner, a thrilling horror movie that tells the story of four friends hiking through the wilderness of Scandinavia, encountering unfortunate events due to wrong decisions, which unintentionally led them deep into the black forest of Norse mythology, creating a mysterious and unpredictable atmosphere. Excellent choice of music, various highlights, all make this movie a horror masterpiece worth watching. If you enjoyed my video, please subscribe to my channel.